It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, Sir Keir Starmer faces down his critics over the appointment of Peter Mandelson. In a bruising session in the Commons, the Prime Minister admitted his judgment was wrong and the former ambassador to the US should never have been appointed. But he denied misleading the House, saying he had been repeatedly and deliberately kept in the dark.
It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information.
The Right Honourable Gentleman said to a previous Prime Minister at this dispatch box, if he misled the House, he must resign. Does he stand by those words?
Also tonight, thugs for hire carrying out anti-Semitic attacks on Iran's behalf. That's a line of inquiry for police looking at a series of incidents at Jewish sites in London. We'll discuss the fears of a foreign state using hate crime by proxy to inflame tensions here in Britain. Plus, birth trauma campaigners take their case to Parliament. Sarah Jane's been speaking to reality TV star Louise Thompson, who is leading calls for a dedicated maternity commissioner. And the government says it will ban phones in schools by law, a change in stance, in fact, as it tries to get the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill through Parliament. All that to come and a lot more here on the UK Tonight. Good evening, I'm Matt Barbet. Now, the Prime Minister has told MPs today that officials at the Foreign Office deliberately and repeatedly withheld the fact that Lord Mandelson failed security vetting for the role of US ambassador. During what was a pretty bruising two-hour session in the Commons, which saw two MPs kicked out for calling him a liar, Keir Starmer insisted he did not mislead the House. He called it, frankly, staggering that he wasn't told even when he launched a review of the vetting process. The issue of what the Prime Minister did and did not know is a serious test of his leadership, and today's scenes are likely to be repeated tomorrow in an emergency debate on the Mandelson affair, requested by the Conservatives. Our political editor Beth Rigby has more.
Have you misled Parliament, Prime Minister?
Keir Starmer pledged to be a different kind of Prime Minister.
We need to clean up politics.
A leader who would restore public trust.
My government will serve you.
Through stability, accountability and integrity.
I never turn on my staff.
The Mandelson scandals helped undo all of that. The Prime Minister come into the House of Commons to explain how Lord Mandelson was made US ambassador despite failing developed security vetting. His argument clear, it was the Foreign Office's fault.
The Foreign Office officials who made that decision did not pass this information to me, to the Foreign Secretary, to her predecessor, the Deputy Prime Minister, to any other minister, or even to the former Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormold. I found this staggering.
And had he known, he wouldn't have sent Mandelson to Washington.
If I had known before he took up his post that UKSV recommendation was that developed vetting clearance should be denied, I would not have gone ahead with the appointment.
But the PM's position hard to defend. The former public prosecutor curiously incurious over Mandelson's past.
I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
The opposition going for the jugular, pointing out the PM did not apologise for misleading the House.
Earlier today, Mr. Speaker, Downing Street admitted that the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House. The Prime Minister has chosen not to repeat that from the dispatch box. I will remind him that under the Ministerial Code, he has a duty to correct the record at the earliest opportunity. The earliest opportunity to correct the record was Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, almost a week ago. This is a breach of the Ministerial Code.
and quoting Keir Starmer's own words about former PM Boris Johnson back at him.
On the 26th of January 2022, the Right Honourable Gentleman said to a previous Prime Minister at this dispatch box, if he misled the House, he must resign. Does he stand by those words, or is there one rule for him and another for everyone else?
Some on his own benches, past and present, dissatisfied too.
This has damaged the party that I've been a member of for 50 years. I urge him to take steps to clear this toxic culture out of our party.
It's one thing to say, as he insists on saying, nobody told me. Nobody told me anything. Nobody told me. The question is, why didn't the Prime Minister ask?
This was a Prime Minister that promised to be different, but being forced to the Commons to explain away the Mandelson vetting scandal has thrown his government into crisis and raised real red flags over Keir Starmer's judgment. The scandal has hollowed out his number 10, set his government against Whitehall and left his MPs in quiet despair. There may not be a smoking gun today or appetite to move against him from MPs so close to critical elections, but it leaves an already embattled Prime Minister weaker still. Keir Starmer said his piece. On Tuesday, the microphones handed to Ollie Robbins, the former Foreign Office chief, sacked by Starmer over Mandelson and now summoned by MPs to give his version of events. With Robbins poised to come out fighting, the PM's not out of the woods yet. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, joins me now from Westminster. Evening to you, John. Look, this is just the start, isn't it? The start of this latest phase, if you like, of the Mandelson scandal, with Ollie Robbins due to speak tomorrow, that debate again in Parliament, and also PMQs on Wednesday.
There's no respite for the Prime Minister. I somehow doubt whether the PM will actually speak in tomorrow's emergency debate. I suspect he may well send Darren Jones, his little helper, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. He sent him to the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting tonight. MPs had been hoping the PM would address them to try and calm their fears and reassure them, but he sent Darren Jones. Darren Jones, who spoke for half an hour or so, took half a dozen questions, said it was deeply frustrating that this row was overshadowing everything else that the government was doing. Now, today's debate, of course, threw up lots of questions. Diane Abbott put it very well, why, oh, why? A lot of MPs asked that question. There were those in the Commons this afternoon, I was there all afternoon, who thought perhaps they suspected Lindsay's revenge for last Wednesday, that row between the Speaker and the Prime Minister, because Sir Lindsay did seem to call all the Prime Minister's critics, like Diane Abbott and John McDonnell, pretty early on. The other problem Labour had was that the Labour benches thinned out during the exchanges. The whole thing, the statements and questions, lasted 2 hours, 25 minutes. Prime Minister was wilting a little bit towards the end. But the Tory benches were full. They were still bobbing up and down when it got to nearly 6 o'clock, whereas the Labour benches had really thinned out. And the mood at the PLP was pretty gloomy, given the events of the last few days, with those elections just a couple of weeks away. So, an emergency debate, 3 hours for the opposition parties to turn up the heat and cause more trouble and embarrassment for the government. Then PMQs. Kemi Badenoch's point about how the Prime Minister could have mentioned it at PMQs last week, well, in fairness to him, he wasn't asked a question about Mandelson, and of course he's already in big enough trouble with the Speaker for talking about subjects other than what he's been asked about. But this week will be a difficult one for the Prime Minister. MPs, though, don't expect him to be toppled yet. but there is obviously still a likelihood that he will have to go at some point, a lot of Labour MPs say. One Labour MP said to me tonight after the PLP, if he goes, it won't be because of the Mandelson affair, it'll be because of all the other problems we've had, dire opinion polls, dreadful U-turns and so on. But there's no doubt that this Mandelson affair has badly damaged the Prime Minister's credibility because it shows, according to his critics, a terrible lack of judgment in pressing ahead with the Mandelson appointment. Emily Thornberry, who chairs the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, made an interesting point in her question to the PM this afternoon. She said that she claimed that Peter Mandelson had leaked his appointment to the press so to bounce, she said, the government into confirming it. Well, of course, he was known as the Prince of Darkness, as a spin doctor. So the affair drags on. The government tries to talk. I was talking to Peter Kyle, the business secretary after PLP. Apparently there's good growth figures today, all sorts of other good news on the economy, he claimed. But of course, that's not getting any coverage because we're all talking about Peter Mandelson, the Mandelson scandal and the vetting fiasco.
Absolutely, John. Thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me to talk more about this is Keir Starmer's former Chief of Staff, Sam White. Sam, good to see you. Do you think he's in a better position now than he was at the start of the day, or a worse one?
And he's in a better position than he was at the start of the day. I felt there was a sort of transition moment, I think, where Kemi Badenoch's fortunes went down a bit and his went up. She began by saying, you know, he's a liar, not just I believe he is, but I know he is. And then all of that sort of fell away. And all her attacks in the Commons didn't seem to be anything that hadn't already been answered by the Prime Minister in his initial statement. So it felt like a missed opportunity for the Leader of the Opposition in a way that, you know, she may find herself answering questions for her own team. In terms of Keir Starmer's position, I mean, no question, not easy. I don't think he's laid to rest the some of the concerns of the Parliamentary Labour Party, but overwhelmingly watching the debate, I felt that most of his backbenchers kind of came on side, that they thought the defence was tight, and most of the criticism you saw and featured earlier were people like, you know, Diane Abbott and John McDonnell, who are, you know, long-time opponents within the Labour Party, you know, Diane, who's currently suspended. So definitely stronger than he was. I think he had a very clear argument and a clear defence. And I think the most important part of his defence is saying the fact that Peter Mandelson was not given the green light by the UK security vetting service, but that decision to give him vetting anyway was taken by officials in the Foreign Office. But
Sam, look, you're right. You know, a couple of MPs had to leave the chamber because they accused him of being a liar, and the Speaker made them leave. But nevertheless, he has, it seems, a complete lack of curiosity about the process. It's all very well now saying, well, the process was the wrong way around. Vetting should have come before. We've changed it. But at the time, with someone of the reputation of Peter Mandelson, surely any curious leader would say, hang on, I need to know what's going on here and I need to have eyes on this.
I mean, to your point, Matt, around the MPs who were thrown out of the chamber for using unparliamentary language, I always think that's an indication that they know they've lost the debate when they have to fall back to that old chestnut.
But that's a sideshow, Sam. Let's get to the lack of curiosity from the Prime Minister. Do you think that is a fair allegation against him?
I don't. And I think he answered that question directly today, where he said on multiple occasions, Number 10 asked the Foreign Office about the vetting and whether how the candidate had done, and they were always given the same answer, which the Prime Minister described as a conscious decision by the Foreign Office officials not to share that information with ministers. So we would argue
we will hear tomorrow. I mean, sorry, Sam, to interrupt. We haven't got too much time, but we've heard today from the Prime Minister about how he thinks the process didn't work. We'll no doubt hear the same from Sir Ollie Robbins tomorrow, saying the process didn't work. So then that begs the question, if the process isn't working for anybody, why has he, in particular, been thrown under the bus? As Emily Thornberry said, is it always the case that Keir Starmer feels he has to blame other people for these mistakes?
So, I mean, Ollie Robbins is someone who I've worked with. We were on a board together last year, and everyone who I know who's worked with him has huge respect for him. So, I think Ollie is outstanding as an individual and as an official, and I don't think there's any suggestion that he has done this out for any inappropriate reasons. But I think the Prime Minister's argument he made repeatedly today was, there were multiple occasions in which this really critical piece of information that officials in the Foreign Office had overridden the advice by the UK vetting service, that information should have been made known to ministers, if not at the start of the process, then certainly once this became a big topic of debate, such as when Mandelson was fired, or when the Foreign Secretary was asked to give evidence to the Select Committee, or when the Prime Minister asked the Cabinet Office Secretary to start investigations, develop vetting process. And the Prime Minister would further say the fact that they didn't tell ministers was bad. The fact that the Foreign Office decided not to even tell the Cabinet Secretary, who is an official, not a politician, and is the boss of the Permanent Secretary, is a really problematic decision.
But as someone who's been through the vetting process themselves, and I know how intrusive it can be, asking about who you've slept with, and I mean, that's really quite personal stuff, isn't it? You can see why, if they think the process is not to share this with politicians, why they stuck to that process. So therefore, people will wonder if Ollie Robbins, and it's his birthday today, by the way, I'm sure he's not having a particularly good one, but nevertheless, people will wonder if he's just been scapegoated by the Prime Minister here.
I mean, Matt, you're right. The development vetting process, I've been on one receiving end of it rather than the sort of advice to ministers' end of it. And, it is intrusive. They do go through every aspect of your life and speak to people from different phases in your life, and they find out everything. And it's for good reason. They want to know if you are open to potential blackmail from foreign powers. That's information the state needs to know before they share top secret information with individuals in government positions. But it is deeply intrusive. And I found myself lying on the floor in a fetal position at the end of mine. So, not to be trifled with. And it's right that the content of those investigations and interviews are not given to ministers by the officials. That's right. But I think the point the Prime Minister was making is it's one thing not to give the 7 hours of detail of the interview, but it's quite another thing not to share the outcome of it. And the outcome of the UK security vetting conclusion seems to be raising red flags about Peter Mandelson, and it took a overriding in the Foreign Office for him to get his development vetting, which is within the rights of the officials in the Foreign Office, but whether it's the right judgment, I think, is problematic for them.
Sam, thank you so much for coming on. As I said to John before, this is just the start of this latest phase of the Mandelson saga. I'm sure we'll hear more in the next coming days and may well speak to you more about it. Thanks again. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. Police investigate possible Iranian links to arson attacks at Jewish sites in London. We'll have more on that in a moment. Also ahead, birth trauma campaigners take their fight to Parliament. We'll be hearing from Louise Thompson as she talks to SJ about her calls for dedicated maternity commissioner. And we'll have the details as the government says it will ban phones in schools by law.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
2 teenagers have been arrested after a synagogue was firebombed in North London. It is the latest in a series of anti-Semitic arson attacks, and counter-terror police are now investigating whether Iranian proxy groups are involved as part of an attempt to inflame tensions in Britain. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, has been taking a look.
A blurry amateur video of what is a crude arson attack on a synagogue, but the message behind it is deeply sinister. Those claiming responsibility call themselves Harakat Ashab al-Yamin al-Islamiyah. They say the synagogue in Kenton is a centre of Zionist influence, and they name individuals connected to it.
The group is claiming to be behind 5 other recent incidents, including what happened here in Finchley in North London, where 2 people threw a brick and 2 bottles believed to contain petrol at this synagogue. So who is this group claiming to be pulling the strings?
It looks as though it is a new brand of the already existing organisations. You'll have people at the very top who are likely to be the Iranian, if it's linked with all this, to be the Iranian targeters, the ones who are giving the targets out. You will then have a layer of a recruitment in there. Again, these are people with Telegram accounts, Snapchat accounts, looking to recruit people, teenagers from the age of 16 to 19, 20, 21 years old, that are being recruited to perpetrate these attacks.
4 ambulances were set on fire in Golders Green in late March, and there have been 5 incidents in the last few days in London. The attack at the Finchley Reformed Synagogue on April 15th, and on the same day a petrol bomb was thrown into the car park of Iran International, an anti-regime broadcaster based in Wembley. On the 16th there was what seems to have been a hoax that dangerous substances had been dropped onto the Israeli embassy. The next day, an attempted arson attack at the former offices of a Jewish charity in Hendon. And in the early hours of the 19th, an arson attack at a synagogue in Harrow. So are these crimes connected?
It's a very serious and central line of inquiry to look at how these events are connected. If they are, we can see there is a pattern, same methodology, same set broadly of targets. Is really quite a new phenomenon in recent years of people hiring basically thugs for hire to carry out these acts, people who aren't motivated by their links to the cause. So we definitely see that as a core line of inquiry.
These proxy actors may only be in it for the cash. They may not care about the motivations of their paymasters. They may have no ideology themselves whatsoever. But that doesn't mean they're not at risk of prosecution for very serious crimes. If this is the case, and we've seen this with the Russians as well, using proxies, what do you say to those people who are taking money to commit these crimes?
Well, my message to them is very simple. They should not do that. That is clearly very serious criminal activity that comes in scope of the National Security Act. So I would very strongly advise anybody not to get involved in that kind of activity.
Stay still. Stay still.
Dylan Earle was arrested and later convicted under the National Security Act. He was hired by the pro-Russian Wagner Group to set fire to warehouses belonging to a Ukrainian business.
You're assisting a foreign intelligence service.
He was sentenced to 17 years in jail. Synagogues continue to build defences, but with 15 arrests in 4 weeks, the thugs for hire might be finding themselves behind bars. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Joining me now to talk about this is Jonathan Hackett, a US Marine Corps veteran and the author of the book Iran's Shadow Weapons. Jonathan, great to have you with us here on the UK Tonight. Do you think we are experiencing Iran's shadow weapons here on British streets?
Certainly. What we're seeing is a very common modus operandi in the past that the Islamic Republic has used outside of Iran, particularly in the United States and in London, especially the pre-attack surveillance that we're seeing a lot of these groups who may be one group, they may not be one group, using against these targets, these Jewish-linked targets in London in the past 2 months.
And are they doing that strategically to inflame tensions, to create more anti-Semitism?
That's certainly a component. I think the broader purpose may be related to fear. That makes the communities in London feel pressure about what's going on outside of the UK, particularly in the Middle East, to perhaps pressure London to do something, to pressure maybe the United States to back off. And that fear permeates in society with a few actions, perhaps less than 12 different acts in the last 2 months. That's enough to get people talking and get people concerned. And as we saw in the video in the last few minutes, there were new fencing being put up and new security measures being implemented. So these attacks, however minor, relatively speaking, they're actually quite potent, and they have us all talking about it now.
Absolutely. And is this a sort of trademark of how the IRGC, Iran's Republican Guard, operates? And just explain a bit more about them for people who may not be familiar, because it certainly sounds like they're almost a sort of state-sponsored mafia group.
That's exactly right. And there are actually two different intelligence organizations that the Islamic Republic uses outside of Iran. One is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Intelligence Organization, which looks a lot like MI6, for example. Then you've also got the Ministry of Intelligence and Security, or VAJA, which is their kind of top-tier human intelligence organization that historically in the past 47 years has sponsored exactly these types of operations in London, in Hamburg, in Berlin, Paris, and so on, where they'll actually find criminals who have no affiliation to the regime whatsoever, no ideology in their links, but they're willing to carry out these attacks if they're paid and sponsored by the regime.
Yeah, and it's not just, I mean, more recently it seems like it is Jewish places of worship and other buildings and ambulances and that kind of thing. But we've also seen them attack others who are critical, for example, Iran International, which is a UK-based TV station. Is it just going after people they don't like? Is that what it is?
It has a lot to do with the red line topics that the Islamic Republic has set for what narratives can and cannot be said about them. And, for example, Iran International has been attacked in the past. This is not the first time that their journalists have been under attack against or from the regime. And what the regime is seeing is when people begin speaking and exposing things about them, they don't like that. And so what they're trying to do is make people afraid to even talk about it in the first place. And it seems that since Iran International has dealt with this in the past, they're not backing down. But I would expect to see more of the regime acting against them because they refuse to back down.
Because, Jonathan, people watching this here may think, well, hang on, Keir Starmer, the UK government, were pretty keen to show that they were not backing the actions of Israel and the US against Iran, yet still these things are happening. Why would that be?
It has a lot to do with the components of a threat in the first place, and a threat has capability and intent kind of connected together. And it's easier for the regime to act in London, for example, than in the United States because of different reasons. I mean, there's a lot of legal issues where there are some sanctions in the UK, but they're not enforced as strongly as they are in the United States. The financial system in the United States is different. There are all these different factors that they're making them think about where can we actually do something and have an effect to make people start talking about it. And the easy answer for them, if they're looking at the West, is a place like London or a place like Berlin or Paris.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to anticipate things getting worse. If you're talking about them taking easy options now, if they became emboldened to do something else, what could that be? I mean, of course, you've got the Football World Cup in North America coming in the summer. You've got Iran playing in that as well. Do you think that could be a temptation for them to do something terrible?
They may have the intent to do it. The question is, do they have the capability? And the amount of countries that are participating in the World Cup may actually preclude them from being able to successfully target that particular event just due to the hard target nature of something like the World Cup. That doesn't mean they won't try. They may try, but they probably wouldn't succeed. So they'd be thinking about where can we do some smaller scale activities like throwing Molotov cocktails, for example, at a couple of ambulances, which they can do. And it's very easy to hire someone to do that and then claim that they're part of a larger organization. And then that gets the intelligence agencies having to commit resources to looking at very small actors throughout the area, which of course takes away the attention from longer term planning that they may actually have on the shelf.
Jonathan, great to have you here with us on the UK Tonight this evening. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Matt.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll be hearing from reality TV star and campaigner Louise Thompson. She's been speaking to SJ today, and she's calling on the government to appoint a dedicated maternity commissioner. And a group of MPs calls for school uniforms to be more relaxed, so should pupils be able to wear trackies and trainers? We'll discuss next.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Next, to something we have covered a lot here on the UK Tonight, the crisis in maternity care across the country. And today MPs have been debating the issue after a petition calling on the government to appoint an independent maternity commissioner reached Parliament. There are currently no plans to appoint that commissioner, but campaigners believe it will help restore confidence in care. Let's have a listen to some of the debate in the Commons today.
My constituent Jo Page also experienced these systemic failures. Her son was born at William Harvey Hospital in Ashford some years ago. A birthing injury was misdiagnosed and she didn't receive the treatment she ought to have received for what was in fact a 4th degree tear, and she did not receive the right support. And as a result, she's suffered years of pain, indignity and cannot stand for long periods and needs to use the toilet frequently. Now, she works now with MASIC, mothers with anal sphincter injuries, running a support group for local women in Folkestone and Hythe and the wider Kent area. And she also trains midwives and doctors in correctly diagnosing tears, and was recently involved in a Sky News film, The Women Who Weren't Listened To, which tells the traumatic stories of 3 mothers cared for in NHS England hospitals.
The campaign for a maternity commission has been led by the ex-Conservative MP Theo Clarke and the former Made in Chelsea star Louise Thompson. Now, Louise nearly died when she gave birth to her son Leo back in 2021 and subsequently suffered from post-traumatic stress. Ahead of today's debate, she sat down with Sarah Jane to talk about the campaign.
It feels like progress. We've obviously had over 150,000 signatures now. This is such a widespread issue. And I feel somewhat responsible to really try to drive this over the line. And I think somewhat naively, when we kind of embarked on this petition, I thought bearing in mind I have very little political experience, that this would be something that we would get a lot of signatures for and someone would go, yes, OK, we'll make that happen. I'm realising that these things take so much time. So when we first reached 10,000 signatures, we did receive a response from Parliament, and they said that they had no plans to appoint a maternity commissioner, which felt like such a roadblock and really disappointing. It kind of came around the same time that Baroness Amos's report had been announced, and I know that she's working on this maternity review as well that's going to be published around
spring.
spring.
They were almost saying we won't consider this until we've had the official national report returned.
Yeah.
Again, wasted time, right?
Yeah, exactly, because actually this review is just highlighting the things that many, many inquiries have already highlighted before, and so many recommendations have been set out. I think there's 740 plus, and very few of them have actually been implemented.
Wes Streeting, what he always says is that he is listening, he is open to hearing stories and real-life experiences about, you know, the measures he's putting in place that will help people. So what is it you'll say to him?
I mean, I will obviously put forward the suggestion of a maternity commissioner because that's what we're here for and that's what we're campaigning for, because we think that, well, my understanding is that decisions are either made by him, the Treasury, then we have NHS England, we have ICBs, we have lots of different bodies that make different decisions, whether it's the CQC, this new task force.
You can see why it runs so slowly, right?
You can see why it runs so slowly. And so really putting together the case for why a maternity commissioner would connect the kind of fragmented care that we have at the moment.
Would help.
I'd ask about funding, because I think I was reading something yesterday where the ring-fenced funding for maternity care had dropped substantially in 2025. I know that Rachel Reeves increased the budget for the NHS last year, but I'd like to know exactly what portion of that is being allocated to maternity care. To be honest, out of the 200 billion that is spent on the NHS annually, I think that women really deserve to know exactly where that has been spent, and also why we have a 2,500 shortage of midwives when lots of midwives are reaching out to me saying that they can't get jobs. And I know that over 75% of all of that annual spending is spent on staff, but yet people are not being paid fairly. So I'd like to know how they plan on fixing that problem.
I mean, and they're really key questions.
I mean, they're really big questions.
Well, that's the thing. I know you've said before, you know, I don't really know about politics. And I hear that so much from people who find themselves campaigning because of their personal experiences. But I always say, politics is the everyday. It's about your everyday experience and what you can do to change it, to make it better for your family, your small part of the world, the wider public, other people that are with you with the various problems you face. And I wonder how you feel sitting here now as somebody who has started a debate in Parliament today about something so personal to you and your family and to the, you know, hundreds of women that have got in touch with you. I wonder if, you know, in your darkest moment, you thought that you'd end up here doing this?
Honestly, I never imagined that I would be here. I didn't think that I would ever survive. I didn't. I'm not alone in saying that. I've spoken to mothers who are much earlier on in their recovery journeys. I did not think I would make it past that first year, let alone the second year, and then continue to improve and get better. I really struggle. I really struggle when it comes to doing this sort of thing, but I know that I have to do it for the sake of the women that are giving birth right now. I have women that stop me every single day in the street to talk about their experience.
And how does that make you feel? Because let's face it, you're not over your own issues associated with this. PTSD is something that you will live with for your life, the mental and physical scars. So how does that sit on your shoulders, Louise? Because that's quite a lot to take on.
It is a lot, and for the most part, I'm really strong and I'm doing really well, and I'm very, very grateful that me and my son are both here. I was gardening with him all day yesterday, and I was looking at him, and I did genuinely have a moment where I thought, this could have not been me, and that is an unthinkable scenario, but it is a real scenario for people. You know, only this morning I was working with somebody else who is an amazing woman who's a birth trauma sufferer who had a horrendous 4th-degree tear, 300 stitches, and the amount of suffering that she has gone through with her, you know, her son being born dead and then resuscitated and then dealing with complicated challenges, going through a divorce, you know, it really rips through an entire family unit. And the knock-on effects to that, I mean, even from like the economical standpoint of not being able to work for a considerable period of time, I'm not earning anything. I'm not paying taxes. I'm completely reliant on the system then to pay for myself to get better, whether it's subsequent surgeries, it's mental health aftercare. I mean, I had to rely on a crisis team to come to my house every single day for a month, to hold my hand, to tell me that having a feeling that felt like I had fire in my brain as someone that had always been high functioning up until that moment, that was normal and that other people who had severe PTSD or depression felt like that and I would get better. If I hadn't had access to that service, I would have died. This is a real significant issue that I don't think that people that haven't experienced it understand. But we all live thinking that things are never going to happen to us. But unfortunately, this is happening to people. And you can't ignore it anymore.
Women deserve a safe birth.
Women deserve a safe birth. Like, it's our right. We deserve a safe and dignified birth. We deserve to understand what to expect. We deserve to be educated. We deserve to be given choices. If we would like to have a cesarean section, we should be granted that. That is part of the NICE guidelines, and that was not what I had access to. And there are so many other women who also feel like they were uninformed and they didn't get to make the right choices. And then that has inevitably led to you know, ongoing challenges moving forward. And trying to look after a child, a newborn, a baby. Some people have multiple children as well at home that are relying on them. Like, we, you know, as women, we have dependents, and trying to look after others whilst barely functioning ourselves, it's really, like, it's one of the most traumatic things that can happen to anybody in their life.
Well, Louise, you've come... No,
so
Louise,
angry about the whole thing now.
Well, you deserve to be angry, and angry on behalf of other women as well, who I know have reached out to you. And I think, you know, from where you've come from to where you are now, that has got you this far. And I know that you're not done yet. Listen, thank you so much for talking to me. I know that we're going to speak again about this because there's so much more to do.
Yeah.
The Maternity Commissioner is your focus, but then I know that there will be more goals in the future because this area, as we've discussed so many times, is such a mess and is really, really damaging to so many people in their lives. Louise, thank you.
Can I just say a huge thank you to you for choosing to talk about this?
Well, it's so important, and it's something here at Sky News that we are really keen to tell women's stories and push this forward, because, as you said, it feels like we're on the brink of change and you have to get angry and you have to keep pushing for it. So, Louise, let's continue the conversation. I really look forward to that. Thank you.
Sarah Jane there talking to Louise Thompson a bit earlier today. Next, phone bans in schools across England are set to be enforced by law. The Department for Education says bans will be made statutory as it tries to get the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill through Parliament.
It is an important message to be able, for head teachers, if they feel they need that, to be able to say, look, this guidance and what it expects from schools is statutory. And in doing that, we've listened to concerns about how we support head teachers in delivering on this policy. And we've listened to Parliament. This is an approach which is robust, proportionate and effective. It ensures clarity and certainty going forward so that all schools can become mobile free.
Anjum Pirbakos, our education reporter, is here with me now to talk about this. Hi, Anjum. A lot of parents, like me, will be thinking, well, our kids do this already. They've got those little wallets that take them to school. So realistically, what changes with this law?
So what's really interesting is that 90% of secondary schools already have a ban in place, be it through the pocket, the pouches that you're describing, or just an all-out all-out ban. So my last school that I worked in, there were no phones allowed on the premises at all. So this is kind of a, well, schools are doing it anyway, so we're just going to kind of make it official and possibly say, now we've got the support of the Department for Education who've stepped in and said, well, this is what we're going to do. But what I want to know is, how is it going to be enforced?
Yeah.
So what happens then if a child transgresses, as they inevitably will, because the nature of children, what then happens and who then does implement this statutory ban? Is that then down to the school? Is that the governing body? Is there going to be another kind of procedure or system in place to help support schools to enforce this statutory ban on mobile phones? So that's a whole other kind of minefield, if you like, that you're just opening up for schools to deal with something else, in addition to everything else they're already dealing with.
Talking of minefields, what kids wear in school, versions of uniform, their interpretations has long been one of those. A group of MPs is now suggesting pupils could wear tracksuits and trainers as part of school uniforms. I mean, a lot of them already do wear trainers, maybe just plain black ones, but tracksuits as well?
I think there are tracksuits and tracksuits.
Yeah.
I think I want to make that really clear.
Trainers and trainers, absolutely.
Trainers. But I think the idea is that some schools are adopting PE kits for particular days of the week where they know that the students will be taking part in physical activity.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are logistical issues around PE lessons, especially at secondary school, where you've got very finite amount of time in the timetable to allow children to then change at each side of the hour or 50-minute lesson. It means there's a lot of time that's taken away from that PE curriculum time. So there's something there that is something that you could be considering, and I know head teachers have been considering, and it's something that I spoke to a head teacher about just today, where he's made some changes in his school and he's seen the benefits of that.
We felt that asking kids to come in and get changed into their PE kit when you've got 50-minute lessons really devalues our whole PE curriculum. Essentially, they'd be then left with 30 minutes of a PE lesson, give or take. We did actually want to go back to everyone back in school uniform, just because from a standards perspective, we felt it was important and was much easier for us to manage everyone wearing the same thing all the time. But actually, having gone the other way, we are seeing some of the things that this report indicates, which is we are seeing an improvement in kids engaging in PE. We are seeing, actually, because we're treating the PE kit as part of the uniform and not as something different, they're being held to the same standards of wearing their normal uniform.
That is really interesting. So initially reticent, but actually seems to be working out in an interesting way.
I think that the fact that it's become part of the school uniform package and your PE kit is part of that, and then on the days where you're going to be doing some physical activity, it takes away that whole faffing around in changing rooms and I lost this and I lost that, and actually makes the PE curriculum just as important as all of your other subjects. So there's a real kind of positive take on that.
Absolutely. Anjum, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up on the UK tonight, it was a rather large weekend in the Premier League as Manchester City narrowed the gap to leaders Arsenal by beating them yesterday. We'll be talking about the title race next.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
I bet right now you often find yourself asking why. Why was a certain decision taken? Why did something happen? Why did they say or do that? I'm Neil Patterson, and it's my job as a journalist to find out why. Just explain why.
It's a difficult one.
Well, I mean, it's massive.
It's a very, very severe situation.
So if you want to make sense of this complicated world, Sky News' new podcast, This Is Why, is your daily fix. One story every day, and we can find out why together. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
It is time to chat sport now. David Garrido's here with me now. Manchester City are now just 3 points behind Arsenal, still with a game in hand after they beat the leaders 2-1 at the Etihad Stadium yesterday. I watched it. It was a fascinating game. It was high quality, actually, because...
it lived up to the billing, didn't it?
Yeah, well, Arsenal weren't thrashed because they got very close in the second half.
Yeah.
But it did feel, after 90 minutes, that was a pretty decisive result in the race.
Yeah, I think it does feel that way. And if you think about how close Arsenal got, like you said, Barriese hitting the post, Kai Havertz in stoppage time.
Should have got that on
Should have at least put it on target and made Donnarumma make a save, but instead just over the bar. Those are the differences that often, make the difference long term in terms of where the title goes. But as far as, the game was concerned and Erling Haaland scoring another crunch, decisive goal, and then his celebrations at the end, not just after this goal, where he just sort of stands in defiance.
Yeah.
Just had Ryan Cherky done after his brilliant opener. And then, of course, the Kai Havertz intercepting Donnarumma for the equaliser. But this man clearly is sort of almost the defiant face of Manchester City against everyone who just doesn't want them to win a 7th title in 9.
It was a defiant face of Haaland that Gabriel really got into. He was lucky to stay on the pitch because it looked like he moved his head in a head-butting motion, or at least that's what Pep Guardiola seemed to say on the sidelines.
Listen, a lot of people don't like, Haaland's confidence, almost stroke arrogance, but at least he didn't go down to go to ground, clutching his face
to get him sent off.
Yes, and he didn't do that. And I think the referee probably thought, on the balance of things, they've both been at each other. It's actually a compelling contest, just a single duel between them. That why kind of really ruined the game in one sense by sending Gabriel off for that motion towards Erling Haaland. But the things that Manchester City fans did really celebrate after
they did. I mean, Wayne Rooney described their celebrations as over the top. Clearly, he didn't see me celebrating Liverpool's win in the derby, because that was wild. But, I mean, do you think City and their fans are a bit premature? There's still a few games to go, of course.
Well, this is it now. If they win their game in hand, which is against Burnley on Wednesday, which they should do, then they are level on points and potentially with a better goal difference. But they do have a shade tougher run in, Matt. I'd say, when you're looking at going to Bournemouth, who are playing brilliantly and obviously beat Arsenal recently. They've got to play Aston Villa at home. Aston Villa might still be fighting for a place in the Champions League, or those sorts of games. You'd imagine that they've got the strength in the squad and the momentum to win them, but you just cannot absolutely count on it. Arsenal, you would sense have a slightly easier run, but of course they've got zero momentum right now. They've lost the last 4 domestic games: Carabao Cup final, FA Cup quarter-final, lost to Bournemouth, lost to Manchester City. Look, Mikel Arteta's still saying it's not done yet.
He has to.
He has to, and he's been trying to animate, he's trying to enthuse, he's trying to really back his players and rally them. But it's just how much that voice really counts right now, and how much the Arsenal players are hearing it. We will find out, I'm sure, in the next few weeks, because, as I said, it's absolutely thrilling title race that is not done yet. But, in fact, there's a really interesting game at the other end of the Premier League table.
John will, talks about it as the best medical he ever failed. It seems strange you get so far down the line, and a player of his calibre, the possibility of signing him, it would have been a massive threat had he signed for Rangers, but thankfully he didn't.
It's very, very seldom you see a player
in the building, walking around at a club, and the deal isn't done. But historically, Rangers have been stung a couple of times signing players who had glitches, you might say, in America. Famously, Daniel Prodan was one a number of years earlier, but there had been others as well. And I think they'd reached the stage where they weren't going to take any more risk.
And then I failed a medical at Charlton.
John Hartson was last week tipped to be on his way across South London for £5 million. But for the time being, that seems a dead deal.
Been a lot of speculation, and if there was any chance in it, it'd have been done.
Spent the day with Alan Kirbishley, walking around the valley and being in the training ground. And I was training every day. I was scoring goals every weekend. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I can't pass a medical because of this knee.
I'm not bitter, no, not at all. I'm not a bitter person, you know, I just get on with life. I've got no problems with my knee or nothing, you know, I'm lashing balls in and everything else. And it does get a bit, you know, frustrating at times. You know, people keep going on about medicals and that, so that does unsettle me a little bit.
I shouldn't think you want to see another one again, do you?
No, I don't want to do any more medicals, to be honest.
David, thank you very much indeed. Let's take a look at the weather now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
There is an area of high pressure in charge of the weather this week, so things are generally looking fine and settled. There will be a few showers around on Tuesday and also a brisk wind in the south. Back to this evening, many of us are going to enjoy a fine end to the day. There are a few showers dotted about, most of which are over the Republic of Ireland and western Scotland. Tonight, another band of showers will move in from the North Sea. These will fizzle out as they drift across us. By dawn, we'll have just a handful of showers around, mostly in the north. On Tuesday, many places will have a bright and sunny start. There'll be a little more cloud and a few showers around, especially in the north, but these will largely fade, and then things should brighten up. There'll be a keen wind in the south, making things feel a spot cooler than temperatures suggest. The showers over Ireland and Northern Ireland should fade during the afternoon, and most places, look at that on the map, will see clear skies, sunny day. It's going to be pleasant.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
That is all from me and the team on the UK Tonight. Jonathan Samuels is here up next with all the news from around the world. Thanks for watching. Back tomorrow. See you then. Bye-bye.